What is up, my brothers and sisters, my agents of respect? It's your boy Trey Johnson back with another episode of the No Disrespect But podcast. Before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Always feel free to comment. Just make sure you keep those comments respectful. And if you're interested in supporting your favorite podcaster, yours truly, the link to do so will be in the episode description. Now, the boy's a little bit under the weather. Actually, had to take off work early. That's why Dapper Dan here, but had to get this episode out. College football is here, starting tomorrow. I'm excited. Can't wait. Let's get it going. And look, caveat, going to be focusing heavily on FBS most of the season, but I will find time throughout this football season to introduce some FCS news. There's some FCS programs that I love, and I hope that they do well this year. Two of them have to be in the same conference. Uh, Both meaningful in different ways, but um, looking forward to seeing how they do this upcoming football season. So there will be some FCS topics. I will try to get people who are more um, familiar and experienced in this space, FCS space, than I just kind of talk about some of the teams that we may not be familiar with. That are some of the best programs in the nation. They just don't get the love because they aren't in the FBS. So just expect that throughout the year. But today's episode is going to be focused on the FBS and most notably the Power Four conferences now, because we don't have the Pac-12, which is crazy, but it is what it is. So what I really want to start with is some of the big stories, at least in my opinion, that are going to be coming out through this football season, and maybe some questions that we want answered. And I just going to start with it. Who's going to replace Saban? Uh, some people hear me say that question. It's like, Trey, the Alabama Crimson Tide hired Kalen DeBoer to be the new coach. He's replacing Coach Saban, and that's not exactly what I mean. I mean, who's going to replace the hold, the presence that Nick Saban held over the game of college football for a very long time, for almost 20 years. So who's going to be that next guy? Could it be Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, a guy who's coming off a national championship appearance with the University of Washington? Really good coach, has won a lot of ball games, has shown the ability to be able to compete, especially at universities that might not have the resources or the talent pool that a University of Alabama has, and he's beaten a lot of good coaches along the way. So he's definitely a guy that can step up. Or will it be Kirby Smart's time? I mean, the guy's only lost 4 games in his whole career, and I think 3 of the losses or something like that were to Nick Saban. It's ridiculous, or something like that. I know it's probably more than 4 losses overall, but um, there are very low margin of error, and you saw that Saban was really the guy that always had Kirby's number, and once he got his team at UGA really together, um, there weren't too many people that could stop them. I mean, they even got a national championship on Alabama's head, if we want to be honest. And so with Nick Saban out of the way, this was a guy who many seen many saw as the heir apparent to Nick Saban. And when Coach Saban decided to hang it up, maybe before he ever hung it up, which we did kind of see, Kirby Smart was a guy who was always going to have his team, and in this case, the University of Georgia and the Bulldogs, in that number with the chance to win a national championship. And I don't really see anything being any different with Coach Smart. I think he's one of the best minds in college football and football, period. If anything, it's hell, will he survive this season? Is he going to be another great who just walks away from the game because of what it's become? But Kirby has every opportunity now, kind of being that elder statesman in the SEC to a degree as well, as far as what he was able or what he's been able to accomplish thus far, from recruiting to SEC titles to national championships. He can take that mantle over. He could be the guy that has the next 20-year dominant run. I can really see that. Ryan Day over in Ohio State, the Ohio State. Is it his time? Is it time for him to step out of Urban Meyer's shadow finally and get a ring? Michigan got a championship, a national championship, before the Ohio State University and Ryan Day's tenure. That's going to have to change. I wouldn't say he's on a hot seat. I wouldn't even say he's on a warm seat. Maybe lukewarm at best. But people are listening. People are noticing, and people are talking. And if Ryan Day, one, can't beat Michigan this year, especially without khakis there, and can't parlay that into a national championship or at least a national championship opportunity, saying that you're in the national championship game, people are going to be calling for Ryan Day's job, I think. And he's a really good coach, really good offensive mind, but when you're at a program like The Ohio State, you're judged on championships, you're judged on titles, and you got to win the Big Ten, and you got to win a national title, and he hasn't done the latter yet. And so maybe this is one of those times where he can now start a domino effect and start a run of his own with the Buckeyes. Brian Kelly, a guy who's now at LSU. We knew what he was at Notre Dame and what he was able to do for that program and turning them into a championship caliber program. He did some great things at the University of Cincinnati as well. And again, with Saban kind of out of the program, Brian Kelly is, you know, dominating the recruitment of Louisiana, which is something that he made sure that he said, this is what I'm going to do. Obviously dominating in the trenches, which is his specialty. Just look at some of the linemen coming out of Notre Dame over the past few years. Brian Kelly has his stamp there, and he has two guys in Will Campbell and Emory Jones who are going to be bona fide first-round picks on LSU's offensive line. So he's building in the trenches, and we know that's what wins ball games. And if they have fixed their defense, they could be a team that's kind of in the hunt for not just an SEC title, but for a national championship. Is Coach Prime. I mean, what better year than now? Shador is a senior. This is going to be his last stop in college football. You have your quarterback, Travis Hunter, junior year, but more than likely going to be his last year in college football. You have talent. You recruited decently. You're in a new conference in the Big 12 with the dissolvement, I guess, of the Pac-12. So, kind of a little bit of unfamiliar territory, but there's a lot of openness with UT gone, with Oklahoma gone. Everybody's trying to figure out who's going to be that person that competes. And I'm not saying that Colorado is going to win a Big 12 championship or a national championship or anything like that. But can Coach Prime start to parlay things at the FBS level that he did at the FCS level with Jackson State? They didn't win any national, HBCU national championships, but did win some SWAC titles. Were one of the best teams in recruiting teams in FCS and in the SWAC. So maybe he can start to parlay those things for Colorado. That could lead them to getting to national championships, much like he got to two national championship games while at Jackson State. Could a guy like, why did I have his name? Norvell. Okay, sorry. Mike Norvell over at Florida State, a guy who had an undefeated regular season. Most believe that the Seminoles should have gotten to the college football playoff. Maybe they're out for blood, and maybe this is his chance. The great in the transfer portal has been doing great recruitment-wise, especially in his state, in Florida. This could be one of those things that catapults Mike Norvell into being one of those guys for the next few years. So who's going to replace Coach Saban? I mean, this is a guy that, again, for at least the past 20 years at the University of Alabama, damn near has been just a focal point of what college football is. But even when you take it in his time at LSU or even his years at Michigan State, he was a guy that had a great presence in college football. And so we know what's going to happen on Alabama sidelines and how hard it will be to replace him, even though technically speaking, he's still around the building and things like that. But I think college football in general is going to be figuring out who's the next guy that can step up and be the ambassador for our game, because Nick Saban was one of, if not the best ambassador for college football that they had had in a long time. And so who's going to pick up that mantle? And some of the guys I mentioned, they aren't necessarily old guys. You know what I mean? Like, I think Brian Kelly is probably late 50s, maybe. I'm not even sure. But he looks young. So he could do this 10, 15 years. Coach Prime can do this 10, 15 more years. Mike Norvell can do this for another 20. Kirby, 20. Ryan Day, about another 20, 25. So these guys aren't necessarily aged or old as you might think. And so they have a chance to really take this game over. And I'm excited to see who picks it up. And I hope it's Kalen DeBoer. Roll Tide, baby. Now, that's one big story. Another big story I thought about is playoff expansion. 12 teams. This is what everybody's been whining about. Everybody's been whining about, oh, we need 12 teams. 4 is not enough. We can't determine who's the best. We need more teams. We need more opportunities, especially for parity in who could be the champion. And with the transfer portal and with NIL, you're feeling like teams that maybe didn't have a shot at points in time, they have a shot now to truly vie for a national championship. A mutual friend of mine on Twitter, he kind of said, "Hey man, I never thought I'd see a day where University of Washington or TCU get to a national championship." And that happened in back-to-back years. So anything can happen in this era, and that's probably why they kind of promoted the 12-team playoff. And I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it is what it is. And just to kind of give you guys perspective, because we're kind of getting into the new year, everybody doesn't remember the rules. So let's try to remind everybody of the rules or the format of this thing. So with the 12 teams, it's going to be 5 conference championships, ranked highest to lowest, and the next 7 highest ranked teams. Uh, Non-conference champions, they can only be seeded at 5 and on. So there will not be a non-conference champion that finishes as a top 4 seed. That won't happen. It'll be reserved for um, conference champions, and then or like the big 4. So SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC. Those are going to be those 4 spots, and then they may put a SEC championship game loser in front of, let's say, the Sun Belt Conference winner or something like that. So we can see something like that happening. Also, the 4 highest teams get a bye, and seeds 5 through 12, they're going to play a first round matchup, and actually the higher seeds are going to be hosting. So now we're going to legit get home playoff games, which is kind of cool. It's always interesting. It's bringing a dynamic that's pretty cool because we never had this at the FBS level. We've had it at the FCS level. I've been a part of some teams that hosted some championship games on their home field. So that'll be kind of cool to see from the FBS standpoint, and folks kind of going to high, environments, just intensity and all those things for a chance to advance in the playoffs. Like that's something we haven't had before. So that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. And then you kind of go into the quarterfinals, which are kind of your bowl games, and then or some of your high bowl games and your semis, and then obviously your national championship game. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a waste of time, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Of I think the 4 conferences, the big 4 conferences, they're going to get who they want. I can see at least 2 of each in each conference. So 8 teams, 8 of the 12 teams being represented by SEC, Big 12, Big 10, ACC. Like I can see that happening. And then you have a group of 5 champion fighting for scraps. And then you're going to have like the SEC and Big 10 because of their strength of schedule and the strength of their conference, adding some really good teams. They're going to say they deserve a spot. So that's 2 spots right there. And then what if another G5 champion? Like I talked about the Sun Belt. What about the Conference USA? Like what if one of those champions are undefeated? Like how are we, or the American Conference? Like how are we determining who gets those final spots, those final 2 or 3 spots? So it's going to be crazy. I think some of the discussions we had with the 4 of who was being left out, who should have been put in, we're going to have those same conversations with, I'll say, seeds 13 through 17, 18. I think we're going to have some of the same discussions. And then next thing you know, we're going to be talking about expanding the playoff again. But that's a big story. It's going to be the first time we see it. I've been playing the college football game, and it's worked. It seemed reasonable, but I've seen some 4 and 5 lost teams making it to the playoffs. So I'm like, I know it's a video game, but I pray to God like something like that doesn't happen in real life. So I'll be interested to see what kind of it looks like and what the format does, and if it provides the parity that some fans have said they have been longing for in college football. The last big headline for me is who will be the best player in college football. I think last year we knew it was Caleb Williams. We knew the year before that, it was either going to be Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. So we kind of knew those guys. We knew it was Bryce Young the year before. We really don't know. I mean, is it Carson Beck, quarterback out of UGA? Is it Dylan Gabriel, elder statesman now at the University of Oregon? Spent the last couple of years at OU, spent some years before at UCF. Is it him? I think he's the favorite to win the Heisman this year. Is it Luther Burden III, wide receiver out of Missouri? Is it the Milroe show? Jalen Milroe out of Bama, Ollie Gordon II out of Oklahoma State. Harold Perkins, because we love defense over here too. There's a Harold Perkins, a guy who can really make some moves defensively. James Pierce, some who believe he will be the first overall pick this year. I even put Travis Hunter in there because, to me, I think he's the best player in college football based on what he can do on both sides of the field, offense and defense. I mean, hell, if you put him back on special teams, I think he'll dominate there too. So, who's going to take that mantle? I feel like we just don't know. There's so many questions, and they'll be answered. They'll be answered throughout the year. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Now, as I think about some things, and I was going to kind of go with my conference champion predictions, but I'll wait, um, and then do my 12 teams that I think will at least make the playoffs or something like that. Um, when I think of teams that I think will be the most surprising and the most disappointing, I'll go here. Team I think that will be the most surprising, I think it's going to be the University of Florida. They have one of the toughest. I think they have the toughest schedule in the FBS. I most certainly am confident that they have the toughest one in the SEC. But this is a make or break year for Coach Billy Napier. I believe Florida hasn't had three consecutive losing seasons since the 1930s, and so if he doesn't, provide some type of winning this year, he's going to find himself out. And this is a guy who was seen as a home run hire, 2 years ago? When they hired him and LSU missed out on him and ended up going with Brian Kelly, and everybody's like, "Oh, Florida got the guy you want," and it was a whole big deal. Well, Brian Kelly's looked amazing and what he's been able to do with LSU. Billy Napier, not so much. And look, I know there's a lot of different circumstances that have gone on with that. NIL deals kind of falling through. They're being sued right now by an athlete who had signed with them and then rescinded his offer and things like that. But it's a make or break for Coach Napier. He has to win, especially with some of the off the field things kind of coming their way and all that negative attention. Winning cures all. And they're actually projected to win 5 games. It's like about 5.5. I think I'm going to say they're surprised because, one, I think they're going to win about 7 games. Then they're going to get 7 games. And they're going to get to a bowl game. I think they're going to win a bowl game. So they're going to have a winning season. I think they're going to end the season on a winning note. So that's kind of like a little bold prediction or a team I think will surprise some people. And I think they'll be in some games this year as well. Now, the most disappointing team, and it's really not a fault of their own, I think it's going to be the University of Texas. Let's be honest. Between them and OU, University of Texas was the prize darling from a football standpoint, especially of this conference. Like they just were. And OU was kind of seen as a tag along just for the ride that you can come to if you want. And they've had a ton of injuries in the backfield. Baxter Jr., who was probably going to be their star running back, he gets injured. I think they lost his backup running back. And so, look, Stark is one of the best offensive minds in the business, so I know he can figure it out with who he has. But I think there's some questions at the wide receiver core. Yes, they got Isaiah Bond, but who else? You lost Xavier Worthy last year. I think they lost their top 3 receivers last year, if I'm not mistaken. So, because Xavier Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, I'm sorry, Adonai Mitchell, and can't remember the guy's name. I think it was number 14. Was kind of a big body receiver. So they lost their top 3 guys. Who's going to step up is kind of the big question mark in the wide receiver room. And look, Quinn Ewers, a lot of people have him as a first-round pick. I think he could be a first-round pick. I don't see it, but time will tell. But Archer's behind him, and Archer's breathing down his neck. And we can pretend and act like that's not an issue or that's not something that I think Quinn is paying attention to, and even UT boosters and UT coaches, especially soccer, paying attention to. Kind of reminds me of, to be quite frank, the OU situation with Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams, right? I mean, Spencer Rattler was projected to be a first-round pick, top 10 pick at that. And he was playing okay. Like, he wasn't going crazy, but he was playing well enough. They were undefeated. They were winning games. And then they insert Caleb Williams into the lineup. I think it was some sabotage because Lincoln knew he was gone and that, he wanted Caleb to go with him. And the only way to do that was to bench Spencer and start Caleb. And so there was some politics involved, in my opinion. But I can see some of that happening with the Texas situation. Quinn Ewers has had some battles with injuries, especially some shoulder injuries. Um, Malik Murphy actually started some games for him last year, so he started over Arch. And I think part of that was had they put Arch in there, I think the cries for that young man to be the starter would have gotten much louder. So they wanted to at least postpone that a little bit. But I can see if Ewers is having some trouble connecting early in the season or is having some injury and health issues, I can see Arch creeping up and being inserted. So with all of that, with that dynamic, I think it's going to be hard, especially in a new conference. If this was in the Big 12, I think they could survive it. But the SEC, it just means more. I think there are a lot of teams. We know the powerhouse teams that are already there, have something on their mind. But I think some of the teams, lower level teams, so to speak, like your Floridas, like your Texas A&Ms, like your I guess Mizzou, I don't want to call them lower level more, but you know what I mean. They aren't the LSU's, Alabama's, Georgia's of the world. Like I think some of those teams that have been staples of the SEC, they want to kind of show that, hey, like, yeah, you guys are coming in, but you're not going to come in on our territory and take over. So it is what it is. Um, so I think Texas might end up being the most disappointing. That's not saying they're about to bottom out and lose a bunch of games, but I just don't think that they are going to be, um, in the SEC championship game or be like a 10-win game team, 9-win team. I think they might be an 8-win team first year in the SEC, to be quite frank. And so is that disappointing, technically speaking? No, but from what the expectations of UT football is, I think it will be. So that's just kind of my predictions on some of the most surprising and most disappointing teams this upcoming year. Now I want to transition to conference champs. I'll start with the Big Ten. I actually think a newcomer is going to win the Big Ten. I think it's going to be USC, University of Southern California. A lot is riding on Lincoln Riley. Not to say that I believe that USC will fire him if they don't have a really good season, but I think he's starting to think about what he can do. Like if the opportunity presents itself, will he go to the NFL? So if things aren't going well with USC and he feels like there's a little bit of heat, but they've at least done well enough offensively to get him a head coaching job, kind of like Cliff Kingsbury. I mean, Texas Tech sucked, but he got him a head coaching job. Maybe that's something that can happen with a Lincoln Riley. Who knows? So a lot to think about with this. But I love their new quarterback, Miller Moss. He was just recently named the starting quarterback, was a backup for the past 3 years, and past 2 years to Caleb Williams. But dude balled out in their bowl game against Louisville, had 372 yards, had 6 touchdowns. And look, Lincoln tends to do well with guys that don't have a lot of expectations. Yes, Baker Mayfield ended up being the #1 overall pick, but he was a walk on in college. There wasn't a lot of expectations. He was undersized for his position, and they did well together. They won games together. They won conference titles together. They got to the playoffs together. Kyler Murray, same thing. Yes, he was a high prize recruit when he committed to Texas A&M, but then he transfers to OU, sits behind Baker Mayfield, comes in, another guy that's undersized, and plays himself into being the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft. But they also win a conference title. I believe they won that year, and they get to the college football playoff. So unfortunately, they ran into SEC teams respectively. They ran into Georgia and Alabama. So it happens. And I feel like when Lincoln doesn't have like the top guy on his team, especially at the quarterback position, he feels like he can run his system a little bit more. Unless I love Caleb Williams, one of the most talented players in college football ever. But I just felt like he did a few things off script. And now Lincoln kind of go back to doing the X's and O's and the things that, hey, just work. I just need a guy that can conduct my offense. We don't need the theatrics and all that type of stuff. And look, Caleb Williams made it look good, but was it necessary? I don't think so. And I think a guy like Miller Moss will do what's expected, but that could also hurt them. But when I think about the Big Ten and how the Ohio State and Michigan have been able to kind of run it the past few years, mainly because none of the other teams have an offense. Iowa's still trying to find an offense. They run like a 1930s offense. I'm surprised they don't run the wing T, to be quite honest with you. So I think a team like USC with the offensive explosion that they have, because they're playing in a conference that doesn't have a ton of great offenses, the defense will not look as bad. They have a chance to really open up well versus LSU and really put people on the map. I think they'll have the games out of conference and in conference to propel them to a conference title game. And I think they're going to win the Big Ten year one. That's just me. Big 12, I think it's going to be a old head. I think it's going to be Oklahoma State. Yes, UT and yes, UT and OU were out of the way. And I think with some of the Pac-12 rejects, Colorado, Arizona, Utah coming in, especially Utah. Utah should probably be the favorite. And normally I would pick them. In my heart of hearts, I want to pick them, but I just didn't want to go back to back with newcomers. Even though the next three are going to be teams that are already in their respective conferences. But I like Oklahoma State. They've kind of been a team that have been in the thick of it year in and year out and just haven't uh, just finished the job. And I think they can this year, especially being led by Ollie Gordon II. I know we had some off the field issues over the summer, but hopefully he's bounced back from that. This is a guy that last year had over 250 carries, over 1,600 yards, and 21 touchdowns, and even had over 300 yards receiving. So this is a guy that is one of the best players in college football. And I think with the two staples in the Big 12 being out now, I think this is a good time for Oklahoma State to not only win the conference, but put themselves within contention for a playoff spot. ACC, I'm going to go Clemson. Now, look, it's easy. I could choose Florida State. I think everybody named Mama would choose Florida State, but I'm gonna go Clemson. Look, I feel like Dabo is tired of respect. You know, I think he's like, look, I'm made in God's name, image, and likeness, and y'all be playing on my religion, and y'all be playing on how I coach, and how I recruit, and all these types of things. I feel like Dabo is out for a little revenge. And you got Club Nick coming back as a starter year two, did okay year one as a starter, and I think another season under his belt as the guy, really now starting to build the offense around him. I think Will Shipley and Mustafa were a big part of what they wanted to do, especially with a quarterback starting his first season. But I think we're going to get to a point or get back to those points where Clemson was putting out good quarterbacks. They were putting out hella receivers and pass catchers. And I think we're going to get back to that a little bit now with a more seasoned quarterback, a guy that can really spread it around and can still make plays with his feet. So I'm expecting some big things from Clemson this year. And I think they're going to be one of the top teams in the nation. And look, so those are kind of the three of the four. Y'all know I got to end with the SEC. Y'all know I got to end with it. Now, I'm going to say it as respectfully as I can. So Coach Saban predicted that in the conference championship for the SEC, it would be UGA versus the University of Texas. I won't be disrespectful. All I will say is that the GOAT is mistaken. I get his rationale. He has a few concerns about the secondary and the depth there for Alabama. Obviously, running a new defensive system, new coach, all these types of things. And maybe he doesn't want to go, he doesn't want to be a homer. But at the same time, it's not like he went full Greg McElroy either. But I just think the GOAT was wrong. I think he was mistaken. When I look at this Alabama team, first, let's just start with the head coach, Kalen DeBoer, a guy who was 104 and 12, 104 wins, 12 losses in his career, 25-3 the last couple years at Washington. The guy is 12-2 versus top 25 teams. One of those losses being in last year's national championship game. The guy's a winner, and he's won everywhere he's been as the head coach. Why would I expect him to do any less at a more premier institution with resources, with talent, with seasoned guys who want to win? And look, I think we talked about length, let a naysayer know we know what the end really stand for, but we won't get into that. Okay. I think it's 2.0 now, because last year was you're replacing a top guy in Bryce Young. And there's a lot of doubts about this Jalen Milroe kid. There's a lot of doubts about this this cornerback position and his defense, and if Saban still has it. The question marks have gotten larger now because there is no Nick Saban. He's gone. He's retired. So now the doubters are not even doubling down. They're quadrupling and quintupling down. So it's time to amp it up a little bit. And so I'm excited. I think the defense in this new scheme that they're doing, I think it's going to generate a lot more turnovers. It's going to give our offense shorter fields. I'm loving that. And I think the Milrose show, man, I think Coach of the Board is going to take it to a whole nother level. The last two quarterbacks he coached got drafted. Last two quarterbacks he coached got drafted. That being Jake Hayner and Michael Penix Jr. He has the same chance with a guy like Jalen Milroe, who I believe will play himself into an NFL draft spot this next season. I want to see it. I think Alabama wins this conference. I think they win it quite handily. Yes, there will be some close games, but I think we're going to walk away from this year saying, damn, they were dominant. And this is a new era. This is the Bower era. Now, I'm looking forward to that. Now, here are a few bold predictions. I was going to do a top 12, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to do bold predictions. Because there's too many teams. I don't want to just pick teams because I know their names, I'm familiar with them, not really feeling like they'd ever make the top 12. Bold prediction number one, I just finished talking about Alabama. Let a naysayer know. That's what we're coming with. I think Alabama will have an undefeated season and win a national championship. I do believe that. If they will win a national championship, they will also do it as an undefeated team. I know the schedule. I think we're kind of about fourth ranked in the SEC or something like that. So it ain't a hard schedule, but it definitely ain't an easy one. But it's just something. It's just something. And the team isn't doing a whole lot of talking. I think last year they did a whole lot of talking. They had to tell us what they want to do, right? Instead of going out and doing it. I'm not hearing that much talking this year. I think guys are about business. I think they're gonna handle business. Alabama undefeated. Another bold prediction, probably the most bold prediction. A non-quarterback will win this year's Heisman. It hasn't happened since my guy Smitty in 2020. It had happened before him since was it Derrick Henry, I believe. So yeah, been a while, if I'm not mistaken. So non-quarterback. There are some guys who are candidates. Luther Burden III at wide receiver. Tez Johnson over at Oregon at wide receiver. Also does some punt return. Can also run the ball well. They kind of hit him on sweeps and stuff like that. Travis Hunter, I talked about what he can do on both sides of the field. I can see him going over 1,000 yards as a wide receiver. I can see him having about 5 or 6 picks as a cornerback, doing this thing as a return man as well. That's a guy that could be Charles Woodson-esque. Who knows? Ollie Gordon III. Whatever. What if he propels Oklahoma State into a top 3 seed? Having the year of his life. That could be something. Harold Perkins on the defensive end. A guy that can rush the passer, can play that Mike linebacker, so you can put him in the slot as well. So there's ways that he can generate turnovers and sacks and things like that. And then Donovan Edwards at the running back position as well in Michigan. I think their coach loves to run the ball. They have a running quarterback as well. And so I think Donovan Edwards, he's not going to really be splitting reps as much as he did, like he did with Blake Corum. And so he might be the bell cow for them. And so he can parlay that into an opportunity to be a Heisman winner. Another bold prediction. Four SEC teams will make the college football playoff. And I'm going to say, I'm going to say that one of those 4 teams will have 3 losses, if not more. And last but not least, Tulane, the Green Wave. They will make the semis of the college football playoff. Tulane, that's probably the largest one I have right now. Tulane, they will make the semis of the college football playoff. There it is. That's the one. Much like my Knicks one, y'all was clowning me, and we almost made it. Tulane's gonna get it done for me. They're gonna get done. New coach, new quarterback, all that. Tulane's gonna get it done for me. Anyways, as I always in the show, if I offended anybody, it's a good thing, right? It's an opportunity for me to learn. It's an opportunity for you to teach me. All I ask is that you keep it respectful. And before I say peace, make sure you catch me Wednesdays, Bayou Ballers Podcast. Me and my boy Tay Visuals. Follow him on Twitter. That's TAE Visuals on Twitter. Follow my boy. Follow me at Future NBA Gov or follow at But Disrespect for the podcast. But support our show every Wednesday. We usually record around 6:15. Get the episodes posted. We're putting shorts all on Twitter, man. Like, subscribe, man. Show us some love. We talk about NFL and NBA. Obviously, we're both from New Orleans, so we talk a lot about the New Orleans Saints, especially this upcoming season. So looking forward to that. We've had a few episodes out now. Catch us on YouTube. We're gonna be going live on Twitter and all that type of stuff too, man. So really excited for this journey and want y'all support there. But keep your support here as well. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put the work in, putting the work in because I want to give you guys great content. So hey, we're gonna keep sticking to the same things we stick to here on the No Disrespect But podcast, covering all of the sports. And guess what? If you miss me that much, you can always catch me every Wednesday. Bayou Ballers Podcast, around 6:30 in the evening. We're gonna be live streaming. Make sure y'all comment, engaging with us. Love to have y'all. Love to work with y'all. Peace.